Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. Welcome back to another episode of Getting to Unstuck. We are Colin, Crystal, and Carol, and we're with Whole Human Coaching. You're going to hear a little bit from each of us in the next little while. But today we're going to be talking about the magic of the pause. So when you feel backed into a corner, when something happens to you, or when there's a question to you that is demanding to be answered, where is the line between reacting and responding? So we're going to look at how to use the pause in life moments and what the experts tell us happens in our brains when we either react or respond. So let's talk about this first. Let's help people kind of understand what moments in their lives they may be feeling that type of a pain point.
Well, I mean, I think it happens a lot when you're in a work situation or an office situation, and things just aren't quite going right, and you begin to react, and you begin to get triggered, and you begin to perhaps say things that you might not want to say, or you might regret later. Your anger levels go up. All the body starts to tell you that you're getting stressed out. And ultimately you might be saying things that you're going to regret later on, right? And the other person obviously is going to be creating some kind of judgment about you, right? Based on that reactivity and that moment of triggered, right? I guess. But the longer term consequences, I think, are even more important, right? So you begin to run into things like prolonged sadness, or guilt, or depression, or sort of a base level of anger that's always there, that is never good for your body. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why you want to reconsider reactivity versus what was the
Responding versus reacting.
Just responding. I was like reactivity versus reactivity. No, that's not it. But reactivity and triggerdom versus calm, cool, collected response. And it's a much healthier place to be, both for you, for the other people that you're interacting with, and also for your career and performance evaluations and things like that, because people will quickly draw judgment, right?
For sure.
You're in this reactive state.
I think Carol is frozen.
I am.
So can you hear it? Oh, wait.
She froze, but
she'll be joining us in a second.
She'll be coming back.
Yeah, she'll be coming back in. She has some great information for us about what we're going to be talking about. Colin, can we just swing back around to what you talked about? You said a couple of interesting things there. Well, a lot of interesting things, but a couple of things in particular where when you talked about if people have like that, you can tell that you're in reactive mode. If there's like prolonged sadness or there's anger, I think that sometimes we lie to ourselves very easily.
Right.
And we'll tell ourselves, I'm not an angry person. That's like, we have a picture in our mind of who an angry person is, and it's definitely not me. Or we have a picture in our mind of who a sad person is. That's definitely not me. And I know even for myself, when I have gone through some extremely traumatic things that have been really like all-consuming. It can feel all-consuming. It comes at you. And, life doesn't press pause just because you're going through a difficult time. And I think back to who I was in those situations and how now I realize how I was diminished and I was being reactive in certain things. There's a diminished version of myself. What are some things that you've seen in yourself when you've been in reaction mode?
I think the real issue is baseline stress levels, right? I think. Hey, Carol, welcome back.
Hi, Carol.
I think the challenge is that we get so accustomed to a really high level of baseline stress and cortisone and all the chemicals that cause, anger and depression and guilt and sadness and stuff like that. So I think it's kind of interesting because I think when I was more reactive than I am today, I think my baselines were all really elevated.
Mm.
Like I just didn't feel good all of the time. So those little spikes of reactivity didn't seem that consequential. And yet
Yeah.
my body and my stress and the impact on myself and other people and people
Mhm.
around me and colleagues and things was really detrimental. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of one of the keys that we need to share with people, is that your baseline stress and anger and depression and stuff like that, it's not normal and it's not
Mm.
good for you. And so
Yeah.
I think your normal should come down. The volume on those sort of negative
Mhm.
emotions that aren't serving you
Mhm.
should really come down.
Yeah.
So true, because part of what occurs is our brains are completely hijacked and that we're not aware. When we have that kind of response, and I don't want to reiterate if you've already covered
Oh,
this, it
no, go ahead.
really
No.
is it's our more primitive brain. It's the
Mhm.
amygdala that responds in those kind of situations, which was completely appropriate at the time when we were evolving. But as human beings, as we have evolved beyond survival, at least our brains have.
Mhm.
There is we've emerged into our prefrontal cortex, which is where executive function happens,
Yeah.
and that's where choices happen. But
Mm.
when we react because something has called us back to that survival place, or we didn't get the promotion or we had a huge fight with our spouse, what happens is we don't have any choice. We immediately go into one of two states. We go into fight or we go into flight. And that's not something that we have any choice of immediately. However, we do have this wonderful prefrontal cortex, which gives us a third option. And the third option is to pause. It is before we
Mhm.
open our
Mhm.
mouths or type something horrible or storm into somebody's office that we take a few breaths, because that is what happens as you were describing, Colin. That's the reset when
Mm.
our primitive brain goes, "Whoa, no saber-tooth tiger."
Yeah.
We have an option here, which is to make a different choice.
It's interesting. You both are also meditators. One of the meditations that I've done quite a bit is with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it's about breaking the habit of being yourself. And there's a point in the meditation, and I do it myself now too, where you're walking through a scenario and you imagine that you're going to react the same way to that scenario as you did before. And then, but you also then start to visualize yourself saying change, change. And there's no attachment, there's no judgment to it. It's just an objective moment where you interject and you change the pattern. And I think that that's really what, like, the pause, learning to use the pause is a bit to me like a muscle.
Mm.
Like the first few times it may be really hard, or you may not be able to catch it. You may in the first little while, you may be like, oh, I should have paused there. So we see ourselves progress. So like many things in life, we want to be able to flip everything right away. But I think it's really important for us to think about that, the fact that first of all, life, we're in the long game. So this is a marathon, not a sprint, as is us becoming the people that we want to be. But that just even being able to recognize where you could have paused is something to honor in yourself, so that you can take
Yes.
that forward into the narrative that you're building for the days ahead for who you are.
So true. That awareness is really the key to it,
Mhm.
because you're right. It's going to be in hindsight the first, I don't know, 25 times. And then
Yeah.
there'll be something that triggers you or activates you that
Yeah.
comes out of left field. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. I thought I really had a handle on this,
Mhm.
but there I am, at flight level 60
Yeah.
when we want to be in flight level
Yeah.
2. And it's going to happen. But that awareness and celebrating that awareness
Mhm.
is so important for us. Just to,
Mhm.
oh, I noticed it. I noticed it 5 minutes later, but I noticed it.
Yeah. So when we say when we talk about the pause, can we give some definition to that? Like how, what are some things that we know is proven to be good? They're proven to be pause-worthy tools for us to use to actually create that for ourselves, and to to have it on hand because it's inevitable that it's going to happen.
I've got a couple that I can share.
Yes.
The first one would be to come from a place of curiosity and not conclusion, right? So if you come from curiosity, you'll ask more questions instead of going straight into the argument or straight into the reactivity. The second one would probably be to get back into your body. So again, I think the other day we spoke about the body being a loudspeaker. Start listening to it, right? It's sending you signals all the time. And then you can also take an adult timeout, right? It's not just for kids.
Yes.
We should over and above celebration is just cherish and nourish our feelings. Now there's work to be done about how you got to that reactivity and what's the origin story of it, right? And we can talk about that maybe another time, or if we've got some time today, but there's an origin story to that reactivity. So I would say celebrate, yes, and investigate. Because it's not going to serve you over the long term. And as you investigate, you can label those feelings, right? You can begin to identify what they really are, where they came from, because it's not the person in front of you that, well, it might be, but you are the one being triggered, right? It is your responsibility how you react. So being able to manage that, having you have the power of that management is so critical.
I think so too.
And I think it often, unfortunately, that awareness and that understanding of what's happening in our body often takes a bit of a crisis to be able to notice. You were describing, Colin, how you realized after some time that you had this background level of stress that was having you react to smaller and smaller things. And at some point, there must have been something that had you say, stop, I need to investigate.
I mean, for me, I remember exactly what it was. It was a few years ago. I was still living in Europe, and I had my body just shut down, and because of depression and anxiety and overwhelmment and everything like that, it literally just stopped working. So I obviously wasn't listening for a very long time, and it could have been worse, right? And it is worse for many people. So you don't want to get to that stage. Trust me. It's because next step is really heart attack, right? And or worse. But the body is always sending signals. I wasn't listening for a long time, but
I think it's also. I think you also said something important, Colin, earlier when you talked about when we're triggered. The word trigger is such like a zeitgeist word. Everybody's using it all the time. But there's a difference between being triggered by someone or something and accusing someone of triggering you. That is giving someone power that they don't have. That's power. And so a reactive thing, here's a hint. If you are someone that is saying they triggered me, they're triggering me when they do this, there's an indication for you right there that you are in reaction mode, because you're relinquishing your personal power. You're relinquishing your agency. Maybe it is triggering for you, but don't, we divest our own personal power for ourselves when we give it that to someone else that they're not even asking to have.
Well, goes back to words and the power of words.
Mhm.
And even in that word trigger, one of the things that I've been using more often is activate. Because to
Mm.
be honest, for me, the word trigger is a trigger.
Yeah.
It is a violent word.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it feels appropriate when we're having a conversation, but more often what gives me the sense of empowerment is that I am being activated.
Oh,
So
yeah,
it isn't all negative. It isn't all something that I want to get rid of. It's like that gives me that sense, Colin, of being
Mm,
able to be more gentle and curious. Like,
Mhm.
oh, something's
mm,
happening here.
right,
I
right.
wonder why or what is going on. And that is, it gives that ability for us to consider, as you said, what my role is in it,
Yeah.
Crystal.
Right.
If that person who just cut me off in traffic makes me scream and yell,
Mhm.
that person, I have no idea who they are. I've got no investment in in a relationship with them, but something is now happening to me.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a really
Yeah.
and
Where did
also
it come
maybe
from, right? Where did it
yeah,
come from?
exactly.
How is
Yeah.
it serving you? What's
Mhm.
the origin story? What's
Yeah.
the impact on your body or your colleagues in the car?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
So I wonder if something that we could leave our audience with
Mhm.
today is what are those cues in your body?
Mm.
And Colin, I know you're very versed in this and you've been paying close attention since that incident. How
mhm.
do you know when it's beginning to ramp up?
I know that my emotions are all go to my gut. So,
Okay.
I mean, it sounds very cliche, but your gut is it's your second brain or
Mhm.
your gut, and your mind,
Mhm.
and they're telling you a story. And I know now the difference between having my stomach in a knot perpetually, thinking that was normal, right?
Mhm.
And my stress levels elevated and my reactivity, even at home,
Mhm.
elevated, and not being a particularly happy, friendly person. Um, and even the way you squint and the way you hold your shoulders, and it
Mhm.
just is, it comes out in so many ways.
Yes.
Um, that we don't listen to, and we tend to get told, well, take an anti-anxiety pill, or take an
Mm,
antidepressant, or
Yeah.
take a muscle relaxant, or take a pain relief. you know um that's fine for
yeah.
for today and maybe tomorrow, but in the long run, um you don't need that in your body. You don't need
Mhm.
that energy
Mm,
around, and you can exercise it in a good way. And then
right.
by exercise, I don't mean exercise, I mean exorcise, like
Yes.
bye bye. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to turn up the volume on the sensitivity that you have for your own way of being, don't you?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I saw this wonderful thing on Instagram the other day, that what was it? I posted it on my stories, that the longest distance is that we have to travel is from our mind to our heart, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I thought that was such a beautiful, beautiful message. And so often, especially in the work world, we turn everything off down, below
Yeah.
here,
Yep.
right? It's all up here. And
Mhm.
that's not serving you in the long run.
So it
We've
takes that
spoken. Yeah.
body scan then. So if we were to invite for each other
Mhm.
today to take a look at what the where we are, because we're
Mhm.
beginning our day in many, at least I am on this side of the
Yeah.
continent, beginning my day. How many times there is a noticeable difference in how I respond physically, which gives me a clue
Mhm.
about how I am reacting.
And
Oh, yeah.
Sam Harris, in his meditation work, says that we should use intersections throughout the day. So
Yeah.
now when we finish, take that moment of pause in whatever you're doing. When you're about to go from here to wherever, the
Yeah.
kitchen or whatever, or the other office, or from your desk to a meeting
Mhm.
room, or getting out of your car as you get into the office, use those moments of
Mhm.
transition
Mhm.
to come back to mindfulness and come back to that scan. Those are great. You don't need Post-its all over the house or the office.
No. I love what he says. It's handles, like door handles, and when you step away from something, those are those transition points where you can.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly.
Opportunity.
Brendan Burchard talks about that in his book, High Performing Habits. He actually talks about high performing people actually build that into their day. They build those, like when you walk, for him, he uses it through when he walks through a doorway and he moves into a different part of the room or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like a transition point. That's
exactly.
a fantastic analogy. And it's an easy thing to embody that people could be comfortable with, because it's just completely, it's just an
It's free.
and it's free. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to wrap for today, our invitation is to everyone, when you are standing up from your desk or you're walking through a doorway, to pay attention.
Yeah.
To take an opportunity to take a breath and pause.
Yeah. Yeah. The magic of the pause. Yeah.
Love to hear how everybody's day goes.
Yeah. Thank you for our time is coming to a close. Thank you for listening and spending time with us today. If you have not yet, we invite you to go over and follow Whole Human Coaching on LinkedIn. That way you will get the automatic updates, and it helps us be able to go live as soon as we have enough followers over there. You can also find us on YouTube, Whole Human Coaching. And as well, you can just find us online, wholehumancoaching.com. Thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic day.
Bye for now.
Bye.